right, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Just double checking. Right before 11, I tried sharing my screen again, and then it looked like it was stable, but then it crashed again, so I had to relog on. I guess I guess the technology really has to get better if we're gonna do this for real, this online business. Um, anyway, hey Jamie, how are you?
You just woke up.
Well, I wanted to just have time for people to ask any questions, kind of about wrapping everything up. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about the whole, kind of life after CMU. What do you do when you graduate? How do you look for jobs? Um, apparently, and in fact, it was Jamie, let me know that my voiceover narration part of that PowerPoint that I posted didn't save, so there's no narration there. So I just thought it would be helpful to talk about that a little bit. And I am recording today's session, so then that'll be available for people who can't join in today. But let's just start if anybody has any questions at all about revisions on any of the sections of the paper. Anything at all?
I kind of have a question. So, like at the end of the paper, should we have like a concluding paragraph included? Um,
You know, I would say it's not necessary for sure. If you want a short concluding paragraph, I think that would be fine. How are you guys doing on like the page lengths? I actually kind of was curious how that was.
I'm already kind of close to the 12, and I haven't even finished one of the experiments that I have a question on for later. But so
Okay. Right. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I guess the page requirements are there so that people don't go overboard. Like one year I had a student who wanted to give me like a 20-page paper and I'm like, no. Right? So, there is a maximum length. If you're just a tiny bit over, I'm not gonna be too troubled by that. And also like, there's sort of a general minimum that's expected because in order, I think, to answer all the questions for all the sections, you need, to write a certain amount. So that's why those page minimums and maximums are there. But if anybody has any questions about that, you know, I'm happy to chat about it. Like if you're, 2 sentences over or under, I would say totally don't worry about it. If it's kind of, a little bit more significant, we can chat about it. For students whose papers are getting on the long side, um, there's almost always ways to kind of go back and edit your writing so that you're being more concise. So anytime you write something like, researchers have shown that, and then you tell us what they've shown, you can always get rid of that phrase, researchers have shown that, right? You can just tell us, actin is a cytoskeletal element. You don't have to tell us that researchers have shown that actin is a cytoskeletal element. That's just one example. It's a common example, I think. It's not wrong to write that first phrase, but it does kind of bog down your sentences after a certain amount of time. And it's really, I don't know what the right word is. It adds clarity to your writing, I would say, when you just use present tense when you're describing what's published. So that's just one tip on if your paper is on the long side right now and you're looking for ways to cut down, that's one thing to look for. And sometimes there's a little bit of repetition. So that can sometimes be a place where you would be able to cut some things down. And the original question was, do you need a concluding paragraph? And the answer is no, right? So if your paper's on the long side, don't feel like you need to do that. On the other hand, if your paper's on the shorter side right now and you're looking for ways like, how am I gonna, reach that minimum length? You can add on a short concluding paragraph. That's okay. Shouldn't be overly long and it doesn't have to restate everything in your paper, but it would be fine to add a short one. And if you're concerned, I probably would be helpful if I just looked specifically and I can give you some feedback. So that was a lot more than you asked, but I think it was a good question. So Um, for those who were just joining, I was saying I'm happy to just take questions on anything in relation to the paper, any of the sections, how the revisions are going. Um, Anybody else have feedback on how the length of their paper is? No. So part 6 needs to become the written form, right? I guess sorry if that wasn't clear, but we did the outline just to kind of get those ideas down. And now you're gonna convert that into paragraphs, just like the rest of your paper. I guess I'll write that on Blackboard too, just to make sure that's 100% clear. Other questions? Anybody else have any challenges they think with the length of the paper? All right, I'm not seeing questions. All right, well, maybe I'll shift gears for now and we'll see if any questions come up, as you're kind of hanging out a little bit, and we'll see if anybody else joins with any questions about the paper. But I just want to say a few words about the whole kind of graduation, looking for a job, like what's that process look like? As I said, I posted a slide about that, but then the narration didn't save properly. So I just wanted to kind of repeat what I wanted to share with everybody, since we have so many graduating seniors. Um, I guess a couple of comments, right? Some students are going to go right straight on to, I don't know, medical school or dental school or some kind of health profession school. And these are biology related majors, so that's a common place that students go. Sometimes they go directly, right, straight from undergrad, and actually increasingly more commonly people do not go directly. And in fact, I just want to say, like, when you look at the average age of students admitted to medical school, that average age is like 23, 24. So the medical schools and the other schools as well are selecting preferentially older students with more experience. Okay, so you're actually at a slight disadvantage if you're applying to those programs straight out of undergrad, because there are a whole bunch of other applicants who have, you guys might call it a gap year. I think we're kind of almost getting away from calling it a gap year. It's just it's just building on your foundation of your undergraduate to get some more experience in the health professions or in science before you embark on your medical career or whichever health profession you're interested in, right? The PA programs want a whole bunch of hours of experience. It's really hard to get those hours, right, while you're an undergrad. It's very hard to do all those things kind of in real time in 3 years of your undergrad. So anyway, health profession schools are definitely a possibility as a post-graduation, career track. Now, if you're not going straight on, what should you be doing with that time? What do the medical schools and other schools want to see? They would prefer to see either you're getting more clinical experience, especially direct patient care. I'm a pre-med advisor, so I know more about the med schools than the other kinds of schools. But Amber Schneider in the college is a pre-health professions advisor. So if you didn't know about her, she's a great person to contact about some of the other kinds of schools. But definitely the medical schools vary in how they sort of give you credit for different kinds of experiences. And some of them are a little, I don't want to say picky, but right, they're going to, some of them are going to kind of weigh your application in a way that, like, if you have direct patient care, that's going to kind of count more in your favor than if you're a medical scribe, for example, right? So that's not actually interacting directly with the patients and taking care of patients. Mostly they want to know that you know what you're getting into going into healthcare. And I guess I just feel like that's definitely an ever-changing kind of um, situation, right? Healthcare. I mean, right now it certainly looks like a very noble career, that's for sure, but maybe also slightly, um, I don't know what the right word is. I don't, well, with pandemics, it sure looks a little bit different. I don't want to say it's risky. There's a lot of, risk in life, but anyway, right now they have a lot of our appreciation, that's for sure. Okay, so that's sort of the health professions. Um, Yeah, so research, right? So that's another thing that the medical schools, especially some of them, are looking for. I've had students, master students, who have done research with me, and then go on to medical school. And certainly, I think the research sort of looks good, right? As one of many different things. It's interesting. Most of the med schools are not going to say that research experience is required, but it certainly is relevant. So it's certainly one of those kinds of things you could be doing after your undergrad, whether it's a master's student or a graduate school of any kind, um, or if you just even get a job doing research as a research assistant. And I'm going to talk about how you can get those kinds of jobs. Um, so my student who was a master's student with me, and she had applied to med school straight out of undergrad, got close but didn't quite get in. Very strong student, but just didn't quite have everything. But while she was doing research with me, she also um, communicated with me about taking a little bit of time to also continue to get more clinical experience. So again, it does depend on the med school you're shooting for. Some of them have more of a research focus, like a research mission. For example, in our state, the University of Michigan is definitely a more research focused medical school. If you want to go there, you really do need research experience. The other medical schools um, have sort of different focuses with sort of different degrees of how much they kind of prioritize research. Okay. Okay, let me stop there and see if there's questions or comments.
Um, I have a comment about like I don't know how you find out which schools are like more research based or more clinical. I don't know, not clinical based, I guess, but I look at like MSAR for med schools and we'll read like their mission statements, but some of them are super vague. I don't know if there's like a better way to like know exactly what schools are looking for before I apply to them.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jamie. So MSAR is a great resource. And that's something you subscribe to, isn't that right, Jamie? You pay like, about how expensive is that?
I think it's like $30 for a year or two.
Yeah, that's about what I had in my mind too. So just so in case anybody didn't know about that, that's a way to be able to view kind of like, what are the average GPAs and MCAT scores and other kinds of information about all the different med schools. And it really can be helpful so that you kind of know which ones to apply to, right? Where are you going to be competitive? Um, the research part, in the state of Michigan, I would say U of M is the only one where I would personally say research experience is almost essential, and maybe it is essential. I mean, I think when you look at, I'm not sure, I haven't looked recently, but certainly the students I've known who've gotten into the University of Michigan Med School have had research experience and quite a lot of it. Um, but none of the other med schools. I mean, I know lots of students without research experience who have gotten into the other med schools. So that's for the state of Michigan. For other ones, I think I I mean, I don't know that there's like one place to look for that answer. I have a pretty good idea. Um, Part of it is like what you could do, but I'm not really suggesting you do this, but it's easy for me to do, is you could look and see how much funding they get, grant funding from NIH. That gives you an idea of how research active they are. So if you did that for the state of Michigan, you would see that the grant money from NIH to the University of Michigan Med School far surpasses how much grant funding Michigan State, Wayne State, Oakland, Western, CMU, it far surpasses any of the other schools. So that it just kind of is an alignment, right? It's a correlation. There are ways to look that up, but it's a little clunky, and I'm not so sure that you need to go, do that kind of research. Um, I know I didn't really answer your question, Jamie, but like if you have schools in mind, I mean, I'm happy to give you whatever, feedback and information I know about them. Um, and I think Amber would also know quite a bit about that because she goes to conferences for like full-time health professions advisors. So she also is hearing directly from the med school admissions people fairly regularly. Other questions?
Thanks.
Or- Okay. So, okay, that's a good question. If you are kind of not coming directly from undergrad, are the med schools looking for more clinical experience? I would say not necessarily. I think they want to see that you're using your time well, or that's kind of a vague statement, but that you're, there are a lot of paths. So there's not just one thing they're looking for. I guess that's what I want to say. So if the average age of someone getting into med school is 23 or 24, that means there's a whole bunch of people older than that, right? Who are going to med school. Those individuals may have done something quite different, right? I mean, I've talked with students who were business majors from CMU and like hadn't taken many science classes. They finish their undergrad, maybe they do one job, maybe they realize it's not what they want to do the rest of their lives, and they want to come back, get the science courses they need, and then apply. So it's not that you would need to have done like for that in that situation, that business person, right, isn't going to have a ton of clinical experience throughout all that time. In fact, they'll probably have zero from undergrad because they were thinking business. They'll have zero while they were doing that business job. Once they kind of make that switch, decide, I actually want to start looking into this other career, they'll start accumulating, getting clinical experience. So I don't think that there's like a sliding scale, like, however many years you've been out of undergrad, you should have like exponentially more experience. I don't think that's the case. It's just going to need to kind of make sense to them when they look at your education and, your life, right? Like your resume and what you've done. I don't know, does that make sense, Rebecca and everybody? Follow up on that? Okay. Other questions? Okay, and Miles has a question. Right, so I was going to shift over to kind of talking about graduate programs also. Um, so, so Miles is saying he kind of missed out on the grad school application deadlines, and that's largely true. That cycle for graduate programs, so this is talking about like research, master's, and PhD programs. Their cycle is the earliest applications are usually December 1st, and that goes to usually February 1st. So it's, kind of winter. You would want to take the GRE usually, although more schools are kind of getting away from that. So you'll want to see if they require the GRE. The GRE is kind of like an SAT, but for grad school, you'd want to do that in like late summer or fall. And for graduate school, getting some experience, like Miles's question is asking, how can I get, how do I get a job as a research assistant or get some lab experience? That's exactly what I would recommend, is getting that experience. It will make you a more competitive applicant. For a PhD program, it would be essential to have research experience because, again, they want to know that you know what you're getting into. For a master's program, the research experience is not essential. For a master's program, they kind of understand that maybe you didn't have an opportunity to get research experience as an undergrad, and so you're going to do that master's degree to get that experience. So you can go to the human resources websites for the big universities that have medical schools. Now, the reason I'm saying look at the universities with medical schools is because they just generally overall have more like biomedical research activity. Like I was saying about like how much NIH grant funding is coming into the different schools. There's a crazy amount of money that NIH, I don't want to say sends to the U of M researchers, but right, they write grants and they write very good grants. And so they actually are awarded a lot of money from NIH, but Wayne State and Michigan State and, other universities also have grant money. And the grant money allows them to hire research assistants. So that's why there's this correlation again with looking for universities, if you're looking for academic research experience, which we'll talk about first. So there's a correlation with like, where's the most research activity happening? There's gonna be more jobs posted. Okay, so if you go to the Human Resources website for the University of Michigan Med School, any day of the year, you will see jobs posted. Some of them will require some experience, but a whole lot of them will be entry-level jobs. So you don't need any experience to get that first job. That's actually exactly what I did. When I graduated from college, I really didn't quite know what I wanted to do, and I had not gotten any research experience. So I got a job as a research assistant in a med school lab. It was actually a gene therapy lab, which I would have told you a big story if we'd been in class. And it was really exciting. It was the early days of gene therapy, and I didn't quite understand everything I was doing. And so I realized I needed to go back to school. And that's what got me interested in genetics. So that's why I applied for a PhD program in genetics. The reason I was able to get into my program is because I had that working experience as a research assistant, and I only worked a year and a half. So it wasn't that I worked super long, but I think, a year of research experience full time actually makes you more competitive than someone coming straight from undergrad, because, full-time research, you're doing it 40 hours a week. And if you like it, then the graduate programs know, hey, you know what you're getting into. And you know it better than even a student who's done undergrad research, because undergrad research is always part-time, right? It's never 40 hours a week. So anyway, going to get one of those research assistant jobs is very doable. And so, like I said, those human resources websites at the big universities with med schools, and obviously not just in our state, there's bunches of them across the country. If you want to go move somewhere else, you will see jobs posted. Now, the other kind of research job you could get is in industry, right? So that means like in a business, like either a pharmaceutical company or a biotech startup company or something like that. So those jobs are, you can, if you have certain companies in mind, you can certainly go look and see if they have jobs posted. But I've seen students get those jobs in a kind of a lot of different ways. One recent graduate from last year was able to find some good job opportunities just by LinkedIn. So if you don't know what LinkedIn is, it's kind of a, I don't know how to describe it. It's like networking, right? It's a networking, website. It's really used a lot by people in business. And it's a way for people to connect. So if a business is looking for people, and they can actually find you, and you can find them. So I would highly recommend making a LinkedIn profile, especially if you're thinking about like the industry business side. Other ways to get those jobs would be on that slide from, I think it's the 414 PowerPoint. I put a couple websites like aerotech.com. That's kind of like a headhunter-ish kind of company. They connect people looking for jobs with companies looking for employees. It doesn't cost anything. You upload your resume, and basically you want to make sure that you're highlighting skills. If anybody ever wants their resume reviewed, I'm happy to take a look, but there's also career services at CMU. You should feel free to take advantage of that even after you graduate. So you should get your resume reviewed before you start posting at places. But anyway, these companies like Aerotech, and then there's Kelly Services in the sciences. I have the actual website in that PowerPoint, and I'll just repost these as well in Blackboard. So those are places where like it's kind of like one-stop shopping, right? You don't have to look at every individual company, right? You're just kind of sharing your information with these kind of middleman kind of companies that maybe you'll be able to get linked up with a company for a job. And we've seen definitely a lot of CMU students get jobs that way. Indeed, right? There's tons of jobs posted there. I guess I don't actually, I'm not sure if I know students who have gotten jobs that way. I may without knowing it. I think it's worth trying a lot of these strategies. Like maybe don't pick one. It's sometimes a little hard to predict, right, how hiring is going to go. And obviously, that whole thing, like if you know someone, take advantage of it, the networking side of it. I think that's quite real. So, it will just make sure that like your resume gets reviewed if you can kind of, have any connection in that company. We do have some CMU graduates at some companies. So, I don't know a ton, but we're trying to keep better track of that. So we do have alums in some companies, and even being a CMU alum, I think sometimes, you know, like my former student Jeremy, he works for Cayman Chemical down in Ann Arbor. And so, he did his CMU undergrad and a CMU master's degree. And so if he sees a student come in, who graduates from CMU, he's gonna have kind of an affinity for that CMU person just because of that shared, educational background. So that can sometimes work in your favor as well. Um, yeah, I think that's about what I have to say about the whole industry thing. At least that I'm remembering. Questions about the looking for research jobs? Feel free to unmic yourself too if you want to just ask. That's great. Ah, Jamie, that's really helpful. Thank you for sharing that. So, okay, so we do know someone who's gotten a job through Indeed. I'm pretty sure lots of people do. It's a huge, huge, place to look for jobs. There's tons of jobs posted there. Okay, so that's great to hear that it was pretty easy. Anybody have questions for Jamie? Did you have to post your resume? Oh, yes, you said that. You can see when employers review your resume. Okay.
Yeah, so I just like would upload it to Indeed, but it's not like you have a profile or anything that like is shared to the world. It's not networking, obviously. So my resume was already like submitted there, and if I found a job, I would just click like apply through Indeed, and it would automatically populate my resume into there as like a PDF link or something. And then it would say how many years of like um I don't know, like medical records. I would just put in, 3 or whatever, and then I would hit submit. It would give me like a review of it, and I would submit it. So I applied to probably like 20 in a day because it's super easy. But if you want a more thorough application with like a cover letter and stuff, it's not. I think there might be like a tab where you can add a cover letter. I just didn't feel like it, so
Yeah, the cover letters are actually a lot of work, and the most effective cover letters are really tailored to that specific company. I don't know if you guys know much about writing cover letters, but at least what I haven't applied for a job in a long time because I've been at CMU for 18 years, but back before I got this job, right when I was looking for faculty positions, I applied for a lot of jobs, and every cover letter was, I mean, there's a little blurb about myself or yourself, right, and a little bit about your background, but you really want to tailor each cover letter to that specific company and that job. um, if you're going to write one. So again, career services can give you feedback on cover letters. There's a lot posted online too about how to write a good cover letter. If you're Googling around and looking for tips on like resumes and cover letters, one thing I would suggest is try to look for like science specific, if that's the kind of job, if you're looking for a sciencey or health professions kind of job, try to look for resumes and cover letters for those kinds of jobs, because I think they, are looking for slightly different kinds of information, and even the order of what information you put on that resume, you might reorder or prioritize certain experiences, a little bit differently depending on what job it is. More questions, comments? I guess one other thing I like to say when I'm talking to students about this is that the path is really, there are many paths, I think, going forward. So, if you're not sure about research, I think getting a job and trying it out, if you haven't done much research, is a great idea. Um, It's pretty low risk, right? If you hate the job, I mean, you can like kind of do it for 6 to 12 months and then kind of move on from there, right? And get a new job. Once you get your first job out of college, it's easier to get the second job, right? If you show that you are a reliable employee, that's going to just help you out a lot. Um, and kind of the whole idea of like deciding to go to grad school or not, I think, um, again, a master's program is going to be like a lower commitment, right? It's usually around 2 years. Um, oh, I know what I want to say about this is you should never pay, this is on the slide, but I need to say it. You should never pay tuition for a biology related master's degree or PhD. That's my opinion, but that's the opinion of most scientists. Uh, it's very different than med school or PA school. For those kinds of professional programs, you are going to pay tuition, and it's going to be a lot of tuition, right? It's even more than undergrad. Um, but for science research graduate degrees, you should not be paying. Instead, you want to look for programs where students are supported by teaching assistantships or research assistantships. And what that means, if you're supported, is that you're not paying tuition, like you have a tuition waiver. And in fact, on top of that, you receive a stipend. So for example, at CMU, a lot of your TAs, if you were an undergrad at CMU, a lot of your TAs are graduate students. If it was a biology class, they're biology graduate students who are working on their master's degree or their PhD, and they are getting paid, right, to be a TA. Now, they're not getting paid a ton of money. It's sort of usually just enough to live on. But what that means is you're not going into debt to get that master's or PhD in research. Okay, so I think that's really important. You will see that there are some master's programs that are asking you to pay tuition, and I'm suggesting that you avoid those because you don't need to. That's what I'm trying to say. There may be some exceptions to that, but that's the general advice about what you're looking for from those programs is you're looking for that support. And what I had started saying is the paths. So, if you start off, you're not sure about research, you get a job. If you don't like it, that's fine, and you can do something else. But if you do like it, and you say, oh, and this was my experience, right? I'm like, oh, well, this is actually pretty neat, and I actually want to learn more, and I want to do more, and I don't want to just be a research assistant who's always told what to do. Like, I think one day I would like to teach. That was how I was thinking about it. And I think it would be great if I could be the one thinking of the research projects. So that's what motivated me to get a PhD. I knew that if I wanted to teach at the college level, and if I wanted to be the person, right, thinking of the experiments and running the research program, that's the degree I would need. So I didn't get a master's degree first. In biomedical sciences, it's not super common. It's the path some students take, but I would say most people actually do not get a master's before they get a PhD. And again, that's specific to biomedical sciences. If you talk to people in ecology or wildlife biology, it's different. There, the convention is you get a master's degree first. And in a lot of those fields, the master's degree can be terminal if you don't want to be a professor, right? If you want to work at, the, I don't know what the right, I don't even have to think about this, but like, the state natural resources or something like that. Most of those scientists are just going to have master's degree. Yeah, so good question, Miles. So if you're applying to graduate programs, how do you pick the programs and how do you pick, are you picking a professor or not? So that's a really good question. A lot of the PhD programs are what we call umbrella programs, which means that they're not just one department. It's maybe a lot of departments that kind of work together, and they just recruit grad students who are going to, in the first year, actually do rotations through a number of labs. So that means you don't need to know who you want to work with. And in fact, like you can't set it up that way. You have to do these rotations and work in a couple different labs in the first year before you choose a lab. So the bigger programs are set up that way. Now at CMU, we have some PhD programs, and for example, we have a new biochemistry cell molecular biology PhD program. We don't do rotations here because we don't have a huge number of faculty participating. So there are some smaller programs where you would want to target the professor ahead of time. So you do have to just look at the graduate program website and see how it's set up, right? If they require you to link up with a professor as part of the application process, it'll say so. And if it doesn't say that, then the idea is, that you'll do those rotations and figure that out after you get into the graduate program. For master's programs, usually you do need to have target that person. I don't know any master's programs where they do rotations. It's only a 2-year program, so you don't really have time for that. So you kind of want to figure it out ahead of time, but you need to figure it out ahead of time. So it's a lot of work. There's no shortcuts, I don't think. You can, right, if you're kind of targeting anything geographically, you can look at the state schools and go to whichever department of interest and just look at the list of faculty. Some websites are really nice and they kind of have short descriptions of the research for each faculty member. So that can be a kind of a helpful, quick shortcut to then kind of read more about what's going on. Another way to find people that you would be interested in working with is actually if you've read a paper, right? If you've read a research article and you're like, wow, I'm really interested in this field. You could go and see, well, where do they work? Okay, they're at, North Carolina State. So I'm going to look at North Carolina State's, biology program, and I'm going to see what that looks like, and maybe I'll be able to work with that person. So it does vary, I guess. So I don't know if that was helpful, Miles, but that's kind of the general approach. Other questions? Anybody think of any questions with their papers, with revisions? Anything at all?
I had a really quick question. Like, given the fact that we are supposed to stay at home and a lot of us are applying this cycle and had like job shadowing opportunities lined up, is there anything that we can generally do to boost our application given that?
Oh gosh, good question. So everything I just said was sort of like pre-COVID-19 advice, right? I mean, right, it was not even keeping that in mind. Let's think about this. So here's what I can tell you. What do I know? I know that the med schools obviously know what's going on. They know that lots of MCAT dates have been canceled. They just actually released that they are adding more dates in early fall and more times per day. So that's not what your question was, but just, letting you know that everyone with the med school admissions understands that this cycle is really going to be different. There are med schools that are actually even going to be reviewing applications without MCAT scores initially, which they don't do generally, but some of them are going to do that. So that's a huge, allowance for the situation. Now, in terms of experience, that's a good question. It is pretty much, I think, I don't want to say impossible, right? But like the typical volunteering and job shadowing, those opportunities are going to be few and far between right at this minute. Now, I am hopeful, as probably all of you are, that that we're going to be reopening things. I don't know what that's going to mean for, like, for example, different like doctors' offices. My son actually went and saw his doctor yesterday just for like a routine, checkup kind of thing. And I was like, okay, they're actually still open. They're seeing patients, but other offices have closed down and they're not seeing patients. So there seems to be a lot of variability in what kind of some of the primary care physicians and other kind of routine, you know, dermatologists and whatever, what they're doing. Some of them are closed down right now and some of them are open. Now, but even the ones who are open, they're probably not super interested in having extra people, right, around because we're trying to do all this distancing. But maybe in another month, right, hopefully if this curve stays flattened and like, you know, and then starts to go on that downside, hopefully some of those opportunities will kind of come back online. I guess I would say keep looking for them, because I think it's really a moving target with, you know, how comfortable offices will be with, you know, having people come in. You know, it's interesting, like, so paying jobs would be maybe possibly easier to get. It really is going to depend, but what I'm trying to say there is that whereas volunteers, I feel like offices and healthcare, right, environments, there might be more liability with just having a volunteer or someone come job shadow. But if you are a CINA, right, and could get a job, you know, being a CINA, like, you know, in well, wherever, or a phlebotomist, or I mean, I know students have gotten some of those kinds of trainings and certifications, EMTs, right? Then you're applying for an actual job, and then that those might be possibly easier to get. I have no idea actually. Yeah, I don't have a good answer, but I think that in your application materials, you know, you could kind of talk about that a little bit, possibly. If you feel like your clinical experience is on the light side and that you had plans to get more, and that you are planning to continue to look for those opportunities, right? You're applying for med school a year before you would go, right? It's really early. So probably there's some place where you can talk about your plans to continue looking for those opportunities. So that before you would get to med school, you would have some more experience. I think that's the best I've got. But I'm actually going to ask that question to Amber. So, you know, I'm one of like, I don't know, 5 faculty members in the biology department that's a pre-med advisor. There's a whole bunch of us. And then we also have Amber, and we all keep in, you know, we all keep in contact and try to share information. And Amber's been getting on like the, you know, I don't know, like the getting information from the med schools, basically. I don't know if she's talking to them one-on-one or if there's like, you know, like places where they're all communicating all together, but she's getting information. And I think I'm going to ask her this question about the experience because Rebecca, you won't be the only one with that question. Anything else? All right. Well, if anyone thinks of questions, obviously feel free to email anytime, whether it's about your papers or about any of this, you know, career kinds of things we were talking about today. If no one has anything else, I guess we can wrap up for today. And I think a couple good things came up. So I'm going to clarify that you need to actually put section 6 into paragraphs. So I'm glad you asked that. And we'll post this recording once it generates. It always takes a couple hours, and let people know that if they're interested in hearing some of this kind of information, that now we have it hopefully recorded so you can hear it. All right. I hope to see you guys Thursday for kind of a final wrap up. Good luck finishing revisions and all your other classes that you have. Looks like the sun's coming out. I'm still in Mount Pleasant, so hopefully that's good. Help us with our energy.
I